Welcome to the latest episode of Discovering the Maverick Factor. I'm Neff Rivera. Joining us today is alumnus Fred Ortiz, Global Practice Director for Sports and Entertainment and partner at HKS, an award-winning global architecture, interior design, planning, and advisory firm. Fred has worked on a number of highly prominent projects with HKS, including an iconic structure in the Arlington landscape, Globe Life Field, home of the World Series champion Texas Rangers. I know to you that sounds pretty good still.
That's awesome.
Fred, welcome. Really happy to have you today.
Thank you. It's really awesome to be back on campus.
I know. When's the last time you've been back?
It's been a few months, I'd say.
Okay.
But you know, it's interesting that I was talking to a high school friend whose oldest son is actually, or was on campus a couple of weeks ago, just touring campus, and was accepted into the aerospace engineering school. And so he was describing all these buildings, and I'm like, dude, it's a different campus from when I was there back in the late 80s.
It's always changes going around here. You come back and there's something new that just popped up out of nowhere, right?
Yeah.
Well, we'll go ahead and jump right in. Fred, I know your journey to success as an architect wasn't always a straightforward path. It was one that probably for you started as a kid, the oldest of 5 boys growing up in El Paso. Can you tell us a little bit more about where you came from?
Yeah, so growing up in a border town was a very interesting thing. Knowing that, or actually not knowing that it was a border town. To me, it was, as a kid growing up, it's like wherever our parents had us, you know, growing up in small apartments and eventually moving from one to the next, and eventually we ended up in the northeast part of town. Mm-hmm. And it was a different environment, for lack of a better term. I think the people, the friends that I made, the coaches were all very instrumental in shaping my day-to-day life and ultimately steering me in the right direction.
I was going to ask you, how do you think those experiences shaped you into who you are today? Have made a long-term impact in that sense?
Yeah, well, you know, it's interesting growing up as a latchkey kid. Mm-hmm. You know, first generation Mexican American. Parents were both from Mexico. Oldest of 5 boys, but having to play the older son, the older brother, and manage that at the same time, being able to walk to school. You know, something that it maybe would irk someone today, mm-hmm. but we would walk to school and hang out with friends, and you know, in the hot El Paso sun, we'd be out all day until, you know, sunset, and before you knew it, it was time to head home. But I think growing up in that kind of climate, that type of city, was very diverse, by the way, because of Fort Bliss. You know, the older I got, I realized, wow, why was it that I was attending high school in a melting pot? It was because of the fact that there were kids from all over, or I guess families from all over the place. But you know, they essentially were growing up in El Paso just like I was. Yeah.
You mentioned your family, your parents, your brothers. What has it meant for your family to see the growth and success you've achieved, to see you in those ends today? How have they felt seeing it from afar?
The short of it is pride. I think that to see, as a parent, because I know I have 4 kids of my own, but I know that as they move through their respective journeys, sometimes there's obstacles, you know, and challenges, but man, there's a lot of successes that go with that. And to see that incremental growth that their son has made over the years, I think it's spoken volumes to them, and they are mostly proud. I mean, I can ask them that today, and they'll, in short, say pride. You know, they're very proud.
One story you told us before we came on camera is your grandmother and the first time you walked with her at your first job. Can you tell us a little bit about that story?
Yeah, I told you that was a very emotional thing for me. So individuals like my grandmother were very, very influential in the person I am today, knowing that as a kid she would actually say certain things like, hey, you know, be sure you look good, and your shirt is tucked in, and your belt is buckled, and you know, walk with pride, and be good, always be good, you know. And so, but I remember the day that she actually said, "Mijo, you know, I can see you in an office, in an architect office, wearing your jacket and tie and carrying your portfolio." And that day became reality. Once after graduation, they were all here obviously for graduation, and so I already had a job in Las Colinas, and I remember taking my mom, dad, brothers, and aunts and cousins, they were all here, and I toured them through my first office, and that dream, her vision became reality. So that was pretty special.
That's wonderful. That's wonderful. Let's go a little forward ahead and talk about your UTA journey. I'm curious, when it was time for you to choose a college and a program, how did UTA come to be on your radar?
As a high school kid in El Paso, college, it seemed distant in a way. But I tell you, there was a man by the name of Coach Shaw, Tony Shaw, and his group of assistants. They were all these really great men that came in my life right at the right time in my formative years during high school. But Coach Shaw one day came to me and said, Fred, these are all the schools in the state of Texas that offer architecture. He knew that I wanted to practice architecture, but he also knew that my other dream was to be a tight end for the Dallas Cowboys. But he came to me with this list of schools, and he says, but this one right here is coming to see you tomorrow. And it was the University of Texas at Arlington. I'm like, where's that? So sure enough, the coaches came. They were looking at my film. At the end of the day, I remember walking into the locker room, and they did that, and then they invited me to come to Arlington. I flew into town. Coaches picked me up. I spent the whole weekend here, and it didn't take long for me to say, wow, I get to play football and study architecture. And this is 1985, by the way, so I think a lot of folks that might be listening to this may not be aware that UTA at one point did have a football team. But yeah, life changed after that, and man, it was so special to know that I was going to be the first to leave home. Again, as I mentioned before, like there's a lot of firsts. Firstborn, first one to graduate high school, first one to go to college, and everything that goes with that.
Yeah. So you mentioned football. While you were here is when the decision was made to end the football program. And I know that put you at a bit of a crossroads, either continue playing football somewhere else or stay here at UTA to pursue your studies. And I know for you that was a pretty unexpected loop that you were thrown into. What lesson did you learn from having to go through that experience and make that decision?
Well, that life can be circuitous in many ways, and that it's not always going to be a linear path. And you have to be flexible and able to pivot and not jump to conclusions, to know that, or maybe not knowing that one day they were going to call us into the locker room and announce that the university was no longer going to fund the program. It was devastating. I mean, can you imagine? I was just 18, but there were upperclassmen who were ready to finish up their college careers, maybe have shots at the NFL. I know that Tim McKyer was a senior, and he was graduating. He went on to play in the NFL, and I'm sure there were several kids that were in the same boat that had aspirations. Well, a lot of them transferred out, but yours truly, just at 18, still kind of had that desire to play. I knew that I had made decisions, but that fork in the road was like, wow, what do you do now? Do I take the other offer to Louisiana Tech? It was a full scholarship, just like I had here. But during that announcement, they said, and those of you on scholarship that choose to stay, we'll honor that scholarship. And so it caused me to think. And so I remember the phone call I made to Coach Shaw and saying, Coach, and I was crying. I'm like, what do I do? And he says, well, do you see yourself as an NFL player? And I hesitated to answer the question because my knee, I had kind of injured it, and so I hesitated to say, well, maybe, yeah, but my knee. And then he went on to say, well, what about an architect? Oh, yeah, of course. He says, well, I think you just answered your own question. And it was then that I just put things aside, and I made a decision to stay, and eventually led to graduation and practicing in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. So, yeah, the lesson was obviously very much about it's not always a linear path.
Now, it kind of sounds like architecture was in your blood, maybe even before football. It was somewhere in the back of your mind. How did you come to the conclusion that architecture was the right path for you?
Well, growing up, I loved to draw, and I didn't know much about architecture. And I find it very interesting that just last week I was in El Paso talking to juniors and seniors in the El Paso school district that are aspiring to study architecture in college, and they're getting credit now as juniors and seniors, and that can carry forward into college. And so I'm like, wow, I didn't have that when I was growing up. But it's that sort of thing that allowed, and people telling me, hey, when you get to high school, study architecture or study drafting. And little did I know about architecture. So in the end, somehow I wanted to be an architect and draw buildings. I didn't know what that really meant, but somehow those that knew of my interests were able to steer me in that direction. And UTA and football, again, that's how it all came together.
And I was going to ask you also, how did your experiences at UTA shape your journey into architecture? Any memorable moments kind of stick out?
My experiences at UTA?
Yes.
Well, I remember being forewarned that practice times were going to be at the same time as studio.
Of course.
Sessions. I'm like, but that stuff went in one ear, not the other. I didn't know any different. But being on campus, and again, beginning that sort of level or enhancing my maturity level, meeting new people from different places, different backgrounds, and then of course being exposed to the creative side, and it was tapping into something that I didn't know I really had in there. I mean, I kind of thought that I loved to do certain things, but man, it was tapping into something at a higher level that was much deeper, and just so that level of connectedness with what I think my passion was to this new thing of being on a campus in Arlington, Texas, was pretty incredible.
That's awesome. And perfect spot, too, in the middle of the Metroplex. That couldn't have hurt either.
Yeah. And to me, it was the big city. To me, it was like, and it was something so different from El Paso. And so I've learned that over the years that there's been sort of this intuitive sense in my gut that says, I think it's time for change, but this one just somehow serendipitously aligned, and I found myself here in Arlington, Texas.
Let's move to your professional background, specifically about your career path. You mentioned a little bit about your first job earlier with your grandmother. Can you talk a little bit about that particular role, what you were doing, and how you landed there in the first place?
It was an interesting time because that firm actually was focusing on healthcare, hospitals and cancer centers and things like that. The technology at the time, AutoCAD. You may have heard of AutoCAD, but it was a platform that allows you to draw, and so that was where hand drawing was being phased out. The computer was being more of an essential tool in the development of documenting your ideas. But after a while, I just felt like, again, back to the idea of what your heart is telling you, and I just felt like I needed a change. And after 1 year, I actually decided to make a move, and I went on to another firm where I was there for 6 years, doing similar work, but really learning about the practice of architecture. And there's so many hats that one can wear within the profession, but I quickly learned that, there's certain things about project management and specifications and code research and all that I understand and I get, but my strengths were in design and graphics communications and be able to really hone in on the creative process.
You just mentioned that change to that second firm, and my next question was about some early professional decisions you made that guided the rest of your career. That sounds like that was one key one.
It is, and again, I keep coming back to people, like the people that you engage where you're currently at. Ultimately, if you make an impression on them, they're going to take you somewhere else, or they'll move, they'll make a move, and you'll all of a sudden you're finding that, like this one gentleman who was 8 years senior, he says, hey, this firm that I just went to, they're looking for young designers. You should submit your portfolio. And before you know it, I'm at an interview, and then there's change. Yeah. And with that comes upward momentum or movement in not only your status within the industry, but your reputation, salary, and things of that nature.
Speaking of upward mobility, your current role at HKS, very convenient that you're a sports fan. When you are designing sports venues, what are some things you're thinking about?
Wow. So I can come at it from a player's point of view.
Sure.
Right. I can put myself in coach's shoes, sure. But also as a fan. And I think those are like three primary essentials of what actually makes some of these venues go. But I feel like I love getting into the weeds and understanding the operational side of things. It's almost like from the inside out, or the term we like to use is mid-court out or the midfield out. It's like there are certain dimensions, but when you start thinking about how people need to move and how efficiently can you make that, along with the fan experience, and what does one go through from the moment they leave their house, drive to a site, park, tailgate, move through a gate, all the way down into a seat, and then there's, again, that experience has evolved over many years too. So I love that I can tap into it, and I can leverage my experiences of watching, let's say, my twin sons who have played college football, who have gone on to play and had experiences with the NFL and now the Arlington Renegades. But it's moving through those facilities that I can learn from and then apply that to my own projects.
Yeah, the Arlington Renegades, the XFL, well, now it's the UFL team that play at the Choctaw Stadium, or former ballpark at Arlington, for those who don't.
That's correct.
Recognize the name. Yeah, I know you would agree with this. Sports of any kind really have the power to bring people together. Can you share a time where you experienced that personally?
Well, I'll tell you a vivid memory that I really hold close to my heart is my first Major League game, and it was at the old Turnpike Stadium here in Arlington. And again, the stadium wasn't that great of a stadium, right? But to me, it was the experience. It was another first for me, and walking around the concourse, and then the opening, to get to your seats is called a vomitory. But that thing was framing an incredible view. It was a late game, so the western setting sun was hitting on the green grass, and the white Ranger uniforms were just popping off. I mean, it was so vivid, and and it helped that at the time players like Nolan Ryan and Ruben Sierra, Juan Gonzalez, Pudge Rodriguez, these were Charlie Huff. I mean, I could go on and on, but those players were actually contributing to that experience, and it's vivid to this day.
That's the way you picture that. I could just imagine it perfectly. So now, obviously, the new gem in the Arlington landscape is Go Life Field. You're a Rangers fan. You got to experience your team chart part of their postseason journey at this new ballpark. I know 2020 must have been bittersweet because that was the first year of the new place, but then because of COVID, there were no fans, and we all know the story. But now you've seen games there. They've won a World Series. The banner's going to stay there forever, and your home played a key role in that. Can you talk about what was it like to see your team go on this amazing run and win the whole thing?
Well, growing up as a fan, a Dallas Cowboys fan, I know what it's like to win a Super Bowl as a fan, right? And so when I came to the Dallas-Fort Worth market, I mean, I felt like I was really consumed with the major league sports. So I immediately gravitated towards the Mavericks and the Stars and of course, the Rangers, as I described earlier. But man, I tell you that there is that struggle, and to think that the team has been here since '72 and they've been vying for that championship since that time. I mean, to me, it's the longer play, and again, it comes back to people, having the right people assembled, and it's that collective that somehow there's a fire or a spirit in that when they get on that field and they start winning and they make it past those hurdles, it's unbelievable. And then when they do it in one of your buildings, it's amazing, So I felt like I could check so many boxes as to what that whole experience was doing for me.
And I want to drill into the experience a little bit more. If I remember correctly, you were at Game 1 in 2023, which
yes.
for those who don't remember, was some consider one of the greatest World Series games ever played. It was Rangers won in extra innings. Take me through your mind, being there, seeing this whole thing unfold. What was it like?
Yeah, so I think the whole thing started that I wanted to document the experience. So prior to getting to my seat, I was actually going around with photographers and actually pointing out certain things that I believe I wanted to capture of the essence of that Game 1 experience. But man, getting to my seat and just sensing the energy of the crowd was unbelievable. I mean, I've been to many games in that stadium, sat in different seats, but when the game was the stadium was at capacity, and the idea of World Series, Game 1, you got to win, and you're so close, you can taste it. I mean, I feel like there was an indescribable energy that I don't know when I'll feel that again.
They just got to get back there.
I do. They just do.
So transitioning a little bit more now to you're the first alumnus to appear on the show with us. For thousands of folks, Globe Life Field is going to be the place where UTA graduates walk across the stage as we tape this here in just a little bit. They're celebrating their transition into this next phase of their lives. Can you talk about what that means to play a role in that particular part of a student's experience?
We create venues that actually transform or amplify experiences, and I didn't realize that the venue was going to lend itself to do that, like allow college students to walk across, get their diploma. I guess they cross home plate, if I understand correctly. I've seen images, but I think it's amazing that I think there is a message there that I can relate to, and that for me as a professional, like that was it currently is the largest project I've ever been involved with. And it goes beyond me, right? There's so many other people that were so much a part of the process, and it's just that. I think people, the process, and to think that an individual who has spent their 4 or 5 years here on campus will be able to walk through that, just like coming to Arlington was, in my process, in my journey, was very pivotal. Like that was the big move for me. And to think now that something that I worked on is going to be the platform where one is moving across the stage, getting their diploma, that'll symbolize the fact that they've just cleared a huge hurdle, and now it's time to move on to their next chapter.
It's very poetic when it comes down to
thank you.
it. No problem. And then, so I alluded this to a little bit earlier. When this episode is released, it will be commencement time for our newest Maverick alumni. Off the top of your head, some best advice for these new grads coming up?
Embrace what comes at you. Keep looking at things glass half full. I think that if I was to say what I would say to my own kids, the future's bright. You control what you can control, and you'll see that that level of commitment, that level of focus, be in the right mindset, be engaged. And I think that opportunities, if you move through life with a heightened sense of awareness, I think those opportunities, as they present themselves, you'll be able to grasp hold of them, assess them, and determine whether or not it's the right thing for you, and listen for that intuitive feeling in your gut that might say, hey, you know what, I think it's time for change, because more than likely it might be.
Not be afraid of changing that path when it comes down to it.
Yeah, don't be afraid. I can tell you really good friend of mine who also came to UTA, had started out, I believe it was business, and then, wasn't right for him, so he went on to engineering, and then he ended up as studying architecture. And there we were together studying architecture. Well, guess what? After practicing 10 years with him in Richmond, Virginia, he now runs a very successful barbecue restaurant.
Wow.
Yeah, in Richmond, Virginia. So you never know where your path will go, but I feel like if you tap into your interest and be passionate and apply yourself, I think you'll find yourself doing that which will feed your soul.
Well said, well said. I think we have some time for quick rapid fire, take the pressure off, some fun, quick answers, just a handful here.
All right.
All right. What have you changed your mind about recently?
What have I changed my mind about recently? The jacket I was going to wear today.
Well, now I have to ask, which one got rejected?
Well, it was one that was blue, so I'm glad I didn't wear blue. See?
I'm blending in with the chair, which is good or bad. We'll see. What would you suggest to your 20-year-old self?
Ooh. Keep at it. Keep at it. You're on the right track. you're curious, and you just need to keep uncovering those rocks, man. Keep turning them over because things will present themselves.
What is the best advice you have ever received?
That it's all in the state of mind. Actually, there's one better than that, but it came from the same person. What the mind can conceive and believe, it can't achieve.
That sounds like a poster. I should write that down
Yeah.
somewhere. How do you define success?
Wow, let's see, coming from a guy that started out really wanting to be a perfectionist and learned that that was going to be really tough to do, but striving for excellence, to me, equates to success. I feel like if I can give everything I have, and using the sports analogy, leave it on the court, leave it on the field, I know that I gave it my all, and it just wasn't right. And back to, I can't control everything, but I feel like if I can do my part and influence others in the process, then I feel like that leads to success.
What is your favorite season of the year?
There's something about early fall. And again, I growing up in El Paso, I didn't really sense the seasons.
I was going to say in Texas, I know that's...
Yeah, but not growing up, but spending 21 years in Richmond, Virginia, I got the seasons, the change of color, the change in temperature. I mean, the fact that you got to bring the cold stuff out, or put it away because the season's changing. I feel like, to me, that's there's something about also the spring, but the idea of new start, and it's fresh, and let's go at it again for another year.
Are you a night owl or an early bird?
A bit of both.
Okay.
I'm more so an early bird. My eyes will open, mind starts racing, and I just got to get up out of bed and get going. So, I have a certain routine that starts pretty early, but depending on what I'm doing, it can go into the wee hours of the night.
I really try to be an early bird, and every single time it fails. One of these days, I'm going to do it. Coffee or tea?
Coffee.
Good answer. And last
Black.
one. Also good answer. There's nothing wrong with a simple black cup of joe.
Yeah.
Last one. What has been on your mind lately that you'd want to share with our audience?
Wow. You may have stumped me there. Actually, what has been on my mind lately is that I'm 57 years old now, and I am looking down the runway a bit, right? So I'm thinking about, you could say that it's going into the end of the third quarter or it's fourth quarter, and I've got this pretty awesome career that I've been a part of, but I want to finish strong, and so working smarter, being more engaged, more than ever, being more committed, more engaged, in order to be a part of a team, like align myself with like-minded individuals that will allow me to thrive and to finish. And I think something I learned over the years was the best way to lead is to get out of the way. So as I look at myself ending strong as possible, I need to be able to identify those individuals around me, or maybe go seek out the ones that I believe I can entrust and leave the legacy of whatever's been done.
Well, you finished strong with us, Fred. Thank you so much for being with us
Awesome.
today. I really appreciate it. And thank you for watching and listening to Discovering the Maverick Factor. That's our last episode for the spring, so we'll be taking a summer break, and we'll be back in the fall with more interesting Maverick stories.